Some songs just get you in the heart. You know, probably most of you know this, but the founder of the Salvation Army, William Booth, once said when challenged on having brass bands in the streets of London, his thing was, why should the devil have the best tunes? You know, and he was on something there. He was on something. That's just gorgeous. A couple of weeks ago, I said that my theme for the fall season was going to be church, what it is, what it should be, what it shouldn't be. My goal is that by the time I get done with the series of sermons that I'm going to do this fall season, frankly, it's a recruiting drive. You know, it's a recruiting drive. In one sense, a minister, especially when you're in charge of a church, is in a privileged position. I get to hear things, and see things, and have conversations that most people don't. But all of us in our society and our culture, well, we're all in a privileged position as well, in that, at least in part, in some part anyway, because of the communications that we have today, because of all the apps on our phones and all the cable channels that we can subscribe to, we are very much aware, or we ought to be very much aware of what's going on in the world around us. And as a Christian, you really would have to have your brain in a watertight compartment, not to just acknowledge immediately as we look at the world around us and have those conversations that there's something seriously wrong, and that we all have an obligation as Christians to do what we can to make it right, you know? And maybe we're not as individuals called to be the agents of a radical transformation of a particular culture, but together we are called by God to be a force for transformation. And unless we embrace that, I just wonder what we're doing, you know? Let me just share a couple of things with you that come to mind. You will remember that, I guess it was just before the summer break, I asked members of this parish if you would lend $10,000, not each, $10,000 total to the youth group, because there's a family of refugees that are travel ready. Their daughter is here already, but are in really desperate circumstance in Syria, in Damascus. And the church that has sponsored the daughter and 4 other families, in fact, having done such good work, they're tapped out financially. And so the coordinator of the Private Refugee Project has basically put a blast email out across the country asking any churches that have money for this to contribute, but that are still short $10,000. And Buenos Williams of Action Refugee Montreal spoke to me, and I spoke to a couple of the youth group people during music camp, I guess it was, and said, are we up for this? And based on them saying yes, I asked you to lend $10,000 to be repaid. I'm really pleased to say that last week I sent a check for $4,000, and this week I'll be sending another check for $2,500. So we're within $3,500 of completing $10,000. So let me tell you just a little bit about the circumstances this family is in. If you've been watching the news, even if you may not have seen them personally, which you won't have, you'll have seen similar. If you've seen any shots of what's going on in Damascus right now, you'll know that this family are living without water. They're living with very, very limited food. And I got an email, got a Friday evening yesterday, from the coordinator of the project in Halifax, basically saying that the daughter had called her parents in Damascus, and they're desperate. Like everybody was basically crying a lot because the bombs and the missiles and the bullets are coming closer, closer, closer. And all it takes is a ticket. They're ready to go. I'll say this, and it might sound like I'm just sort of being a little pretentious here. I hope it doesn't. I got the travel documents, the documents that they do before people are released into a sponsorship program, that tell me a lot about the lives of these people and some of the circumstances that they've endured. The story that I can tell publicly is this is a family who are Palestinian, who had been living in Iraq. They are Sunni. which wasn't a good thing to be under a Shiite regime. And there has been physical violence against them. The son has lost some of his friends being shot. And so from there, from Iraq, they went to the El Hol refugee camp. You've seen the pictures of the refugee camps, and now they had to leave there, and they're in Damascus, and you've seen the pictures of Damascus. I look at that, and one of the things that goes through my brain is, as important and as critical as this situation is, and now there's little doubt that they will be coming to Canada, therefore saved, they represent 85 million people. 85 million people in this world of incredible wealth and resources. What's gone wrong? What's gone wrong? When we see what's going on in Syria and in the Middle East, and just a brief addition to the sermon, listening to CBC yesterday, how we've closed our embassy in Iran and kicked out the Iranian diplomats from Canada. They got 5 days to leave. There's more going on there than they're announcing on CBC. What's gone wrong in our world? What's gone wrong in a world where people think it's okay to beat up your wife, or it's okay to beat up your husband? And I was once listening to a social worker who deals with cases of spousal abuse, and she says, you know, it's good that our society is increasingly aware of the reality and the frequency of spousal abuse. But she says, what tends to make it to the press is the women being beaten by their male partners. It tends to be less reported how many men are being beaten up by their female partner, because there's this male pride and ego thing. Don't want to report it. What's gone wrong? What's gone wrong in our society? What's gone wrong? When Allencroft School was open, it's been closed now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. When Allencroft School was open, and I was talking with the principal one day, and she was talking about the need to provide a breakfast program, because so many of the kids come to school hungry, and they haven't had breakfast. And if you visit the house, sometimes you see that there's a nice car or two in the driveway. It's a really nice house in Beaconsfield, but the cupboards are empty because something's happened financially to mess it up. What's gone wrong? What's gone wrong when in the States there are more mortgage holders that can be defined as underwater, which means that your assets don't trump your that your liabilities trump your assets, even with the value of the house thrown in. So that no matter how hard you try, you're never going to get out of debt unless something changes. But what's gone wrong? And what's gone wrong with the church? I want to read you something. I want to identify the church. And I hope you're getting, a lot of you have heard me preach for a lot of years, so I hope you're sort of getting a sense of where I may be going with this. I received an invitation this week. This is it. I didn't make it up. You are cordially invited to the farewell service. Farewell service is bold. In recognition of 105 years of worship, witness, and service in the community of, and I'm not going to name the church, Anglican Church of Canada, Diocese of Montreal. Sunday, September 30th, 2012. Celebrant will be the Right Reverend Barry Clark, Bishop of Montreal, preacher, Venerable Gordon Guy, Archdeacon of St. Lawrence, retired, and interim priest. Everybody is welcome, and a reception to follow in the hall, and there's an RSVP here. So, I'm being invited to the closing of yet another church. And after the last issue of the Montreal Anglican came out, I had a number of conversations and phone calls from people saying, it looked like there was one whole page devoted to church closings. What's gone wrong? What's gone wrong? And then the big what's gone wrong, put together with the very superficial thing I started with, talking about some of the needs of the world and the local community. Put that together with the other what's gone wrong, there's something gone wrong with the church. And then you put that together with the call of God to be light in the darkness, salt, yeast, the call to go into the world with a message of love and healing and reconciliation and restoration. And you've got to say, what's gone wrong? What's just not happening? And why? When I was putting this sermon together, I was tempted to do two things. One was to just end the sermon right there and ask you to do some thinking a little later in the service, and then next week to come back and let's just share what we think is going on. I think we'd do better to do that another time. The other thing that I was tempted to do was, of course, have a discussion now. But I'm not going to give into either of those temptations. What I'm going to do is contrast with the way it's supposed to be. Even a superficial reading of the New Testament, particularly the Gospels, of course, we'll see that wherever Jesus walked into a scene where something bad was going on, where something had gone wrong, his presence transformed that. His presence transformed the environment and the lives of the people within that environment. Just want to start from the first miracle. And it's a miracle to do with a party. And I think that's always a great place. Like if you're going to start doing miracles, start at a party. So he's at a wedding reception. I have never in my life been at a wedding reception where they've run out of liquor. I've been at many receptions where people ran out of consciousness, but never where they ran out of liquor. On this particular occasion, obviously they hadn't prepared adequately, and they ran out. Now, I don't know what kind of mother it would be who goes up to her son and says, they've ran out of booze, can you do something? But that's basically what it's, of course we put it in holy language, Mary coming up to Jesus. She said everything except, forsooth, thou art my son, the son of the God, maketh water into wine. But she comes up to him, and I was just trying to imagine if I had ever been at a wedding reception with my mother. Not that I consider myself the son of God or anything like that, but they were to have run out of booze. I cannot for the life of me imagine my mother saying to me, Lorne, they've run out of liquor, go to the SAQ and buy a couple of boxes of wine, for God's sake. I can't imagine my mother doing that. I can imagine my mother saying, they've run out of liquor because they drank too much. And they should stop right now. The mothers in the audience are nodding their heads. Okay. And grandmothers. But Mary comes up to Jesus and basically says, can you do something about this? And then, the parrot's not a parrot. The story unfolds. They take the wine in, and the waters become wine. And there's something we're supposed to get from that beyond, great, they've got more booze. We're supposed to get from that something about the power of God over not only the big things, but over the everyday of life. Changing water into wine to save the host some embarrassment. Right at the beginning, this wasn't sandwiched in the middle, between the loaves and fishes and the resurrection. It's right at the beginning. Jesus is interested in the everyday events of your life. The everyday events of your life. And that says something to us as a church about where we ought to be positioned. I fear sometimes we look at the big, the great, the grandiose and miss the everyday, the thing that's happening next door or just down the street. And that first part of the story, in Miracle, it seems to me says that we need to be concerned about the everyday details of life, even the most simple. And it comes from John's Gospel. And what you'll notice, if you read John's Gospel, whenever Jesus does a miracle, it's not called a miracle. It's called a sign. And it's a sign of the coming of the kingdom of God. So a sign of the imminence of the kingdom of God is, A, the recognition that Jesus is interested in every detail of our lives. goes from there. It goes from there. There are other miracles too. The loaves and fishes. That when people gather together under the authority of the kingdom of heaven, when people gather together under the authority of the kingdom of heaven, there is enough for all. And we can play with that one a little bit and stretch that one a little bit in the break. I once heard of, I wasn't present for the sermon, but I heard of a sermon where a person was preaching on what was, and it's a very modern thing, perceived to have been a miracle in a particular circumstance, and it had to do with more people than one would have reasonably expected eating a limited amount of food. And that sermon was preached to a congregation in which there were a number of people who were having serious health issues, and who had there were some children who had some serious health issues. And a number of the people who heard that sermon were left thinking, if God is concerned enough about an audience listening to a pretty poor sermon, that he actually produces enough food to take care of that audience of people who are well fed anyway, why doesn't God take care of my kid? Or why doesn't God take care of my husband who has Alzheimer's? Or why doesn't God take care of me because I was just diagnosed with cancer? So this thing about the loaves and fishes, it's a little tricky here, because Jesus is demonstrating that he's concerned again for our everyday physical needs. But you can't put either too much or too little in that, because if you put too much, you end up saying, God is a God of caprice, benignly dispensing favors indiscriminately. Or if you put it the other way, you end up going, he cares about them, but he doesn't care about me. So you've got to look at other miracles as well. You've got to look at the life of a man who was born blind in a society in which there was no welfare. And Jesus has compassion on him. Compassion. He reaches out with his heart, has compassion on him, and heals that infirmity. And you got to look as well on a Roman soldier, one of the enemies, who Jesus institutes a healing in that man's life as well. And then you've got to look at the psychological side of things. The woman by the well. Go meet your husband. I don't have a husband. You're right. I've had a bunch of husbands, and the guy that you're with now, he's not your husband. And then she says to her acquaintances, you've got to come and meet this guy. You've got to come and meet this guy. He told me everything I'd ever done. Well, he hadn't told her everything she'd ever done. But he had gone right to the heart of her self-image, her self-understanding. Maybe, we don't know this because it's not written in there, but might guess, some shame, some guilt, some fear, certainly a sense of being ostracized. Right to the heart. So he's not only interested that we have enough to drink or enough to eat. He's interested in the other stuff too. Our physical needs, our physical infirmities. He's interested in our psychological infirmities as well. It doesn't stop there. There's another story. It's not a miracle story. This old religious teacher comes to Jesus at night. And after you've been wearing the collar for a lot of years, you're actually in danger of thinking that you've acquired some wisdom. Maybe we have. Maybe I'm smarter or wiser now than I was when I was first ordained. I hope so, at least a little bit. But this guy was really old, so he would have been really wise in a sense. And he comes to Jesus at night, and he starts off, he doesn't even know where to start. He doesn't know to say, you have something that I know I need. I can't even name it, but I know you have it. He can't even do that. He doesn't have the language. He doesn't have the ability to articulate or internalize the thing that he's perceiving. But he comes to Jesus at night and he says, We know that you're sent by God. Because nobody can do what you're doing unless God is with him. So he's observing. He's observing what's happening around Jesus. And there's nothing in Scripture, to the best of my knowledge, that would indicate how much Nicodemus had been hanging around with Jesus, or hanging around on the periphery, at least up until that time. We don't know whether he heard a lot of his preaching or a little. We don't know whether he was there at that wedding reception, or hanging out in the background when that man who was born blind was made to see. We don't know that. But we know that whatever his experience of Jesus was, it led him to say, don't know what it is about you, but this I do know, that no one can do the things that you do unless God is with him. He was clearly perceiving something transcendent, something that transcends normal humanity. You and I can't do that, but Jesus could. And that man recognized that. And so Jesus, was quite abrupt with him, I think. Clearly, he didn't do many units of clinical pastoral education when he was in seminary, because he doesn't respond to him and say, here's what I hear you saying about what you're saying when I hear you saying it. That's what we're supposed to do. Hear and feedback. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, but it's only a part of the thing. He says, Nicodemus, unless you're born again, you're not going to see the kingdom of God. Unless you're born of water and the Spirit. And Nicodemus then is confused. And he goes down the red herring route. Excuse me? Old man? Little womb. How is this possible? And Jesus says to him, and I don't know whether Jesus was just making a point here, or whether he really was perplexed or whatever. He says, hey, you're a religious leader. You're supposed to know these things, but you don't. How is it possible for you to be a religious leader, and please allow me to paraphrase the words of the Lord of the universe, and you haven't picked up on this yet? That it's about spiritual rebirth. So that's what we got. We got a Jesus who's interested in the everyday things of life, our material needs. He's interested in our physical needs, our infirmities. He's interested in our psychological needs, and he's interested in our spiritual needs. And it seems to me that when you distill the gospel, and the gospel imperative that Jesus gives to the church in the Great Commission, you come up with that our marching orders, and it's not me, not just me, but our marching orders include those four things. That we, the church, are to do all that is within our power, because we're not called to do anything more than that. All that is within our power, but of course what's within our power also has something in God's power, let's not forget that, to take care of people's physical needs. And we can't beg off on that. There's no way of dodging that we are called to be responsible for the poor and the marginalized of the world, and to take care of their physical needs. I got to throw this in, and I know it's a bit of a repeat, but please allow it. When we were camping this summer, I was thinking about this family in Damascus. We were roughing it in a waterproof tent trailer with a porta potty to make the kids' life easier, and our life easier, a microwave. The grown-ups had to walk or drive about 2 minutes to the bathrooms. There was hot water there to wash our dishes in. There was certainly no abundance of food, and if we ran out of something, Hofstra was just down the street. And I was thinking of this family that we're trying to bring over, living in El Hall refugee camp. And it was frying my brain a little bit. And I'm not saying that we can do everything. But I suspect that in its power, the church, which is the people of God, can do more. We're supposed to take care of people's physical needs. We're supposed to take care of people in their infirmities. And again, this isn't just for people who have a particular penchant for sick people or old people or whatever. This is a command to the church. Wherever people are hurting physically, we're called to be there. We're called to be there with a cool drink, or a bandage, or a visit, or a hug, or sometimes A, B, C, D, all of the above. No excuses. And there's no way out unless you change the gospel. We're called to be with people in their psychological distress. I'm not a healthcare professional in the psychiatric field, though, of course, Bethany tells me a lot of stuff about what's going on statistically and all the rest of it. There's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of hurt. And I don't want to get into how much of it is self-inflicted by stupid decisions we make, and that leads to, or how much is, inflicted. Just there's a lot of hurt out there. And there's a lot of people using bad coping strategies, or inappropriate, or coping strategies that they think are helping but really hurting. And again, this is so complex. So I'll just abbreviate it by saying the church is called to be there. We're called to be there, providing an alternative community. And there can be healing in community, And then fourthly, the Nicodemus thing. It is frankly astonishing to me how much of a change there has been in our society regarding spirituality and spiritual reality. I grew up in a time when in psychiatry and psychology, faith was looked on as an erotic manifestation of unmet needs. That's what I was trained in. Now, we're living in a world where the May 2010 issue of the Canadian Journal of Psychiatry was about spirituality and basically said that a psychiatrist who doesn't take seriously the spiritual need of his or her clients is not effectively practicing their profession. That spirituality is part of it. In some of the healthcare training in McGill, medical social work, spirituality and spiritual development is a part of the curriculum. And just this week, at the monthly gathering of area Anglican clergy, there was a person from the West Island Crisis Center. She's a social worker, and she's doing her master's in spirituality because it is so front burner dealing with people in their spirituality. Excuse me, isn't this our bailiwick? So it seems to me when you're talking church, we're called to be present in those four areas. If there's any more that you're thinking of, talk to me after. But I think it's four. We're called to take care of people in their immediate and long-term physical needs. We're called to be agents of healing and transformation. We're called to do what we can to deal with people's psychology and who they are in that way as people. That was very clearly worded. And we're called to take seriously people's spiritual needs. And indeed, this person whose name was Faye that I met this week said, unless spiritual needs are being taken care of, she's convinced there won't be any long-term healing. Because of spiritual needs. Isn't that amazing? That the secular world is saying that to us. You are cordially invited to the farewell service. After 105 years, church is closing its doors. You will forgive me if I were to suggest, without naming the church, that in their geographic area, there are no fewer needs now than there were 105 years ago. They may manifest differently. There may be different needs, but no fewer. And that the church should be being militant and a bunch of activists out there in the community, demonstrating and doing exactly what Jesus did and what he calls us to be. Again, when I was putting together this sermon, I had a problem with it because there was so much that I wanted to say in terms of, here's the problem, that I knew I wasn't going to have time to go into, and here's the solution. You get hope? So I've got to do that very briefly and in Cole's notes. I believe that God is calling His church to take a new look at itself and to rediscover mission. But we will only rediscover our mission as a community if we rediscover our own personal mission as God's called people. And we do that when we rediscover in a new way a freshness, a liveliness, and excitement about our own personal relationship with God through Jesus. Because it is that that animates the Spirit. And when our spirit, individually and as a collective, is animated, we won't be closing churches, we'll be building them. And I believe that that's what God wants in His church. Now let's pray.
Amen.
First, can we pray this morning for St. Mary's? In so many ways, there's so much good going on in and through this place. It would take a significant amount of time to name all the good things. But we do have growing to do. So pray for God's grace, for His power, for the working of His Spirit in this place, in our lives, in our community. Pray that God will open our eyes to the specific needs that He would like St. Mary's specifically to respond to. Pray for our programs starting up this fall. Pray for our Sunday school. Pray for the people who will be leading it, particularly Elaine. Pray for our music program. Pray for all the various aspects of our youth ministry. Pray for our outreach into the community. Pray for our ministry to the Vallis and Shadow Dollar and Sunrise. Pray for the world that we live in as well. So much abundance and so much need. Pray that we will have the humility to hear God's voice and to listen to His call. Father, we offer You these prayers and all our prayers in the name of Jesus Christ.